Hello, my name is Tony. In 1968, the Don Siegel directed urban cop drama Madigan was released. It was a cynical, hard-nosed little number starring Richard Widmark. The police were portrayed as fallible human beings who were not exactly averse to the charms of bribery and corruption. Although the title character died, a precedent for resurrection had already been set in an unlikely quarter. In the 1950 British crime drama The Blue Lamp, veteran Bobby approaching retirement, PC George Dixon, Jack Warner, is fatally gunned down by criminal thug Tom Riley, Dick Bumgard. Dixon, still played by Warner, was brought back to life, if you can call it that, for the BBC drama series Dixon of Dock Green, which ran from 1955 to 1976. Dixon must have been about 105 when the show ended, or a zombie, but was still working as a copper. The police force liked to get their money's worth, clearly. Anyway, the point is, Madigan took this on board and was reanimated in 1972 for a 6-episode US TV series called, inventively, Madigan, in which he was again played by Widmark. Hot on the heels of Madigan, Siegel's next picture was Coogan's Bluff, his first collaboration with Clint Eastwood, also released in 1968. Coogan's Bluff was the inspiration for another 70s US cop show, McCloud. Featuring Dennis Weaver in the title role, it ran from 1970 to 1977 and was very popular by all accounts. I'm going to muse on something for a moment because it's just struck me, and sometimes, although it may not be obvious, I like spontaneity. There were a lot of American cop, detective, investigator shows in the 70s. People complain of a lack of diversity today, a celebration of difference. But way back then, in the entertainment Stone Age, those shows were already carrying the flag. Each main character was distinctive or had something fucking wrong with them, either a disability or a characteristic that was likely to cause them problems or mark them out as different in some way. Challenges they needed to overcome or turn into advantages. Don't know what I'm talking about? Okay, allow me to illustrate. In Ironside, Chief Ironside, Raymond Burr was a paraplegic confined to a wheelchair. Columbo, Peter Falk, looked like a street person with a glass eye and curvature of the spine. Kojak, Telly Savalas, was bald and loud with a glucose dependency. Frank Cannon, William Conrad, was fat. Sorry, I don't mean fat, I mean clinically obese or husky or salad challenged or something. These days you gotta be so careful. Jim Rockford, James Garner, was an ex-con. Ooh, stigma. Tenafly, James McEachin, and Shaft, Richard Roundtree were black guys. In Policewoman, Pepper Anderson, Angie Dickinson, was a woman. A real one, no less. Mrs. Columbo, Kate Mulgrew, was another woman. Jesus, guys, they're taking over. Harry O, David Jansen, was clinically depressed. Banachek, George Peppard, was Polish. McCloud, Dennis Weaver, dressed as a cowboy and rode a horse and wouldn't have looked out of place as one of the village people. The Snoop sisters, Helen Hayes and Mildred Natwick, were geriatrics, edging very close to the nearest crematorium. Longstreet, James Franciscus, was blind. And in Chips, John and Ponch were congenital idiots. What I'm saying is, this was the 70s, and just look how progressive and inclusive it was, without even having to try or force it into people's faces or down their throats. Purely organic. That's how you do woke properly, assholes. Look and fucking learn. Right, back on track. Coogan's Bluff is an important movie on several counts, something of a landmark. The stepping stones to a phenomenon that redefined the cop movie genre were thus: Madigan, Coogan's Bluff, Dirty Harry. More than that, it was a dry run for the establishment of the next 20 to 25 years of action cinema. It cemented Eastwood's post-spaghetti western persona, as well as kicking off his collaboration with Siegel, who became something of a mentor. Coogan, the character, is the prototype for the modern-day macho anti-hero that would forever be associated with Eastwood and make him one of the biggest and most influential creative forces in movies. Walt Coogan is a deputy sheriff in Arizona, a single-minded and uncompromising an individual who doesn't respond well to authority. He adheres to the ethic that there's only two ways to do something: his way or the wrong way. We first encounter him tracking down a Native American fugitive through inhospitable desert terrain. A natural hunter, cool, laconic, self-contained, he soon gets the drop on his quarry, and once captured treats him with little regard or respect. Whilst taking him in, he stops off at the residence of a married lady, Millie Melody Johnson, with whom he is conducting a sexual affair. He cuffs the prisoner to the porch. When the man looks longingly at the cigarette Coogan is about to discard, he pointedly drops it and grinds it into the dirt, then goes inside to fill his boots, so to speak. The cigarette scene will link up with the ending, which is why I mention it. His boss, Sheriff McRae, turns up and raves at Coogan, taking a bath at this point tended by Millie in a very fetching nightie about his disobeying orders and being a dick. Then informs him that a murderer Coogan recently apprehended, who then escaped from custody, one James Ringerman, Don Stroud, has been picked up in New York City and taken into custody. He's due to be extradited back to Arizona to stand trial, and Coogan's got the unenviable job of collecting him. Travelling to NYC on a big passenger helicopter dressed in his cowboy attire, a running joke gears up whereby most people he meets assume he's from Texas, much to Coogan's irritation. Arriving at NYPD, veteran detective Lieutenant McElroy Lee J. Cobb informs that Ringerman is in Bellevue Prison Hospital after dropping a tab of acid whilst in custody and becoming unwell. Until he's deemed medically fit for release, the extradition process is on hold and Coogan will have to hang around. Coogan also meets a very fetching probation officer, Julie Roth, Susan Clark. There's an immediate mutual attraction. Not being the patient type, Coogan bluffs, get it, his way into Bellevue and persuades the attendants to turn Ringerman over. And then it all goes wrong. Ringerman's girlfriend, Linny Raven, Tisha Sterling, with associate pushy David F. Doyle, distract and assault Coogan at the airport, busting Ringerman free. The murderous nutbar steals Coogan's gun. McElroy is furious and demands Coogan cease and desist. A telex arrived from Coogan's boss demanding he return to Arizona. Now, this being Clint Eastwood, how do you imagine it will go? That's right, he obediently boards the big passenger helicopter and goes home. Yeah, like fuck. Coogan stalks through New York City tracking and hunting his prey. He interrogates Ringerman's mother, a blousy Betty Field, in her last screen role. Then he seduces Roth to gain access to her files and locate Linny Raven. He has sex with Raven, who then takes him to Pushy's bar and pool hall, where an almighty brawl erupts. Coogan narrowly avoids the police after damn near beating Pushy to death and physically threatens Raven, who fearfully takes him to the cloisters in Washington Heights, where Ringerman is hiding out. Ringerman flees on a motorcycle and Coogan, after commandeering a motorcycle of his own, engages in a high-speed pursuit through Fort Tryon Park. Ringerman is brought down and apprehended as McElroy turns up with some squad cars. Such is the macho power and charm of Eastwood, Roth forgives him for using her and poking Linny Raven. She kisses him goodbye on the roof of the Pan Am building, presumably intending to take up his earlier offer to visit him in Arizona for a poking of her own. As the big passenger helicopter rises into the sky and Roth waves down below, Ringerman eyes up the cigarette Coogan lights. To show that behaviour modification is not beyond him and he can grow and evolve as a person, he offers Ringerman a smoke. Pity he didn't punch him in the face then, but you can't have everything. Gotta mention that the aerial photography of the helipad atop the Pan Am building is a dizzying visual treat. I've never been to New York, but this film gives a stimulating bird's eye impression of its scale and sweep. Although Coogan's Bluff might appear quaint and cheesy now, almost antique in many ways, especially when it comes to male-female relationships and its less than sensitive depiction and treatment of women, it's a tremendously amusing time capsule. The infamous pigeon-toed orange peel scene is a jaw-dropping riot of noise and colour, vision and sound. Pigeon-toed orange peel is a cavernous nightclub venue and the name of a band who plays a song called, yes, Pigeon-toed orange peel. The theme, as Coogan strides through a seething morass of the weird and wonderful countercultural crowd in search of Linny Raven. The scene treads a fine line between parody and satire. It's like Dante had conceived a huge hippie freakout, with liquid light shows, psychedelic music, strobing video clips, naked female breasts and lots of drugs. All peace, love, liberation and freedom, man, until it turns ugly. When Coogan finds Linny in the company of wonderful Digby Albert Popwell, Digby pulls a switchblade. Coogan counters by smashing a bottle and holding the jagged edge to Digby's face. He softly snarls,
"You better drop that blade, or you won't believe what happens next, even while it's happening."
Coogan's Bluff certainly does have its fair share of snappy dialogue and killer one-liners. The film trades effectively on a fish-out-of-water scenario, the difference being where traditionally the protagonist doesn't fit in with the environment and that results in unease, Coogan doesn't really care or let him bother it much, acting with a detached, cool confidence, as if he belongs there as much as he does anywhere, despite his height and attire making him stand out. Roger Moore's Bond would exhibit a similar attitude when strolling conspicuously through Harlem in Live and Let Die. The tall buildings and urban streets are an alternative version of Arizona's hills and canyons, and Coogan navigates them in the same implacable way. The Blu-ray version I've recently watched is a bright, crisp and vivid transfer that doesn't overly sanitize the original print. It still has that grit and grain, just it's better quality grit and grain now. Lalo Schifrin's score includes all his trademark signatures of jazz, funk, rock and even traces of psychedelia, and is very much a beast of the 60s. He's done a lot better than this, granted, but it suits the film it is designed to soundtrack. For Siegel and Eastwood, Coogan's Bluff is an experimental case of testing the water, exploring the boundaries, laying the groundwork. Most apparent in the unbridled violence of the pool hall brawl. The blood is as fake-ass as hell, but the sheer physical brutality of it remains slightly shocking even today. Then there's Coogan physically throwing the duplicitous Linny across her apartment and his continued rough treatment. It's an unashamed feminist beta and would almost certainly elicit howls of hysterical protest nowadays. The screenplay by Herman Miller, Dean Reisner and Howard Rodman is lean and succinct, from a time when writers knew how to tell a simple story with simplicity. Miller would go on to create the McCloud TV show. Reisner would later work on the Dirty Harry script, and both he and Rodman would collaborate on Siegel's masterful Charlie Varick. I found it interesting to note how the film manages Eastwood's transition from Western anti-hero to modern anti-hero. Coogan is a more personable character than Harry Callahan, more polite, more superficially mannered, but still endowed with that harsh, determined, unequivocal edge. He has one foot rooted in the past, half cowboy, half modern cop. He's a 20th century personification of 19th century values, like a lawman from the Old West, updated but not entirely reconstructed and transplanted into the here and now, or the there and then of late 60s urban jungle New York. Harry Callahan would be the full metamorphosis, but Coogan is the foundation stone. Lee J. Cobb is naturally great as the seasoned city detective, exasperated by and despairing of Coogan's refusal to grasp and adhere to the red tape procedures of modern policing. Susan Clark was a familiar face in cop dramas and mystery thrillers in the 60s and 70s, and I've never seen her give a bad performance or look anything less than stunning. And the pixie-like Tisha Sterling is a more sexually appealing Mia Farrow, only lacking the same neurotic skill set, more a flaky nymphette type. Don Stroud made a career out of playing villainous, thuggish psychos in films and TV shows. Here he's on the outer fringes of the same ballpark as Andy Robinson's Scorpio, and is suitably mad, bad and dangerous to know. Nowadays, it's of greater appeal and interest to explore as a historical waypoint in the evolution of action thriller cinema than just a piece of entertainment. However, I still get a blast from watching it, and although crude by today's standards, the final motorcycle chase is a hair-raising experience, especially when you can see it really Eastwood and Stroud on those bikes for some of the time. Best approached as a tongue-in-cheek affair that wasn't and isn't intended to be taken seriously. If you can't remember a time when films were fun, and let's face it, these days it's easy to fucking forget, Coogan's Bluff is a Kool-Aid memoir. It will remind you. Thank you, I'm grateful as always for your time and attention. Slap on your Stetson and do whatever you want to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, be a patron of my Patreon thing, make a financial contribution via the thanks button. Whatever you choose is fine by me. I'm back when I've got more to come back with. I feel there's a big one on the way, and it's not often I've got cause to say that these days. Later, pilgrims.